In this section, we are honored to have Professor Sanna JÄRVELÄ from the Department of Educational Sciences and Teacher Education of University of Oulu in Finland to share with us. May I now hand over to Professor Law, who will outline today's section. Professor Law, please.
Hello everyone. It's my greatest pleasure to introduce Professor Sanna JÄRVELÄ. I'm so happy that she is willing to join us for this keynote. In fact, of course, we wanted very much for Professor JÄRVELÄ to be here physically. Unfortunately, she's too tied up with too many things at this time, but then she's so kind to say, okay, I can do it online. So, and the good news for those of us who's admirers of her work, she would be hopefully coming to be on this campus in November. So watch this space. Just now, Dr. Hugh was introducing the theme of our conference this year, and one of the sub-themes is Generation Z, Learners and Learning. To me, this sub-theme is the core of what we need to have in order for us to be really serving our students, our teachers, this day and age. We've been talking about learning design and everything, but the focus of all of this is the learner. So who are our learners? Of course, we are learners too, but very much the Generation Z, those who are born after the year 2000, that means those who are born within this millennium, they are going to take our planet, the people who live on this planet, forward. So it's so exciting for me that, to know, actually, I learned a little bit earlier, several months earlier, that Professor JÄRVELÄ, I've been a great admirer of her work because she's been really doing a lot of work in the area of community-supported collaborative learning, and particularly in the area of motivation and regulation. All kinds of regulation you will be listening to in a while. And so I don't want to take up too much of time, but then with my introduction, but I just want to very briefly introduce Professor JÄRVELÄ. She's professor at the University of Oulu, Department of Educational Sciences and Teacher Education. And she's also head of the Learning and Educational Technology Research Unit. Currently, she is the president of the European Association for Research on Learning and Instruction. So without further ado, may I invite all of you to join me in welcoming Professor JÄRVELÄ.
Good afternoon, and thank you for the warm welcoming. I'm very pleased to participate in your symposium in distance, and also looking forward for my visit and meeting you face to face later. So greetings from Finland to your symposium. Today you can see my title of my talk, which is Social Self-Regulation in Learning. I'm grounding the research work we have been working in theory and in empirical levels, and also showing your examples how we use this understanding of progressing learning success, especially looking forward toward Generation Z. So my talk, I will spend a little time describing from my perspective and from my research perspective what is the need, what are the core issues needed to provide our current young people and also adults for the future. When we are looking for Generation Z, especially, I have a very good theory to offer, which can help to understand something what is especially complex for learning for the future, and I will introduce that theory. I also show you briefly our approach to study this phenomena and also some of our most important research evidence. Then I spend some time to discuss about the implications. So if theory is not useful for practice and changing something how people learn, then it's useless for me at least. But I will demonstrate for you how we have been using these ideas in practice. And in the end, I will introduce our very big research agenda on project Generation Z, as we call it, Gen Z. This is something we have started in collaboration in human sciences and technological sciences as well in University of Oulu, actually during this year. So this is something we are looking forward and working in the next 5 years. Okay, so first, what is 21st century learning and especially looking towards Generation Z? Generation Z for us is important to consider those people who are now diginatives, but also they children and grandchildren. So this is actually something very important, looking very far. I always want to start expressing how important is the world and the field we are working, because education is so fundamental for the society, but especially for us as an individual people and individual learners. And my perspective, I am learning scientist, and I always have been working to understand how people learn, because I think that understanding how people learn and all these complex processes is something that we can help those people who are not that capable of learning, but also take, for example, new innovations and technologies to repair those problems that we can understand in those learning processes. So my message is that bringing learning sciences helps to understand how people learn and then help them to make their futures. I'm sorry to start a bit ugly or even scary picture. I know you all are familiar with this world, but it is reason to emphasize this scenario or this everyday, almost everyday life what is soon coming to us, because it is true that digitalization and automatization and all kind of robotics and artificial intelligence will shape our future. If not yet today, soon they will. And I welcome that world. I don't. It's not my point that we will change teachers to robots or something like that. That's not possible ever. But I'm welcoming this world to help us to focus on something more human and our human competencies and abilities, because that's the power what we have. But considering the future, I think the most critical and very, very timely and acute question is that what is actually learning today? How do we learn today so that we are capable putting our full potential of our competencies in the future when it may be and it will be different than today? Reflecting our field, learning and education, we know that different kinds of way how we teach and learn and study and educate people, they will change. They will actually change very, very soon. And also, because simply we cannot educate people and all areas of people and all the possible ways of people need to learn and train their skills in this way of we are doing at the moment. Another thing is that perhaps something, the contents we study at the moment is also reconsidered, and we have to concern the skills and knowledge learned at schools and what is needed. Currently, we know that there are certain areas, especially in Finland, we have renewed our curriculum about a year ago, especially trying to consider and reflect the future, what will be the future when today's children are working. And we are more and more emphasizing, for example, interdisciplinary intelligence, which is quite important. It's actually very important that we start considering and solving problems not only from one discipline perspective, but we train and organize opportunities that today's students can consider perspectives from history and combine some understanding from maths and think about different perspectives while they are investigating and solving problems. Another thing which I believe is very important, more important in the future, and it is what I call hot cognitions. We are very good on cognitions today. We know the information processing, and we know that artificial intelligence can help us a lot. But hot cognitions is something which probably is getting more power, and this is something human-like we have. All those emotions, affects, empathy, creativity, things which are not so easy to reply or things so easy to apply to the machines or computers. Also, meta-knowing is an aspect which needs more attention, something what considers and helps us to activate what people know, what we understand, and where is the right kind of information, where to trust and where to find information. And this is something that which has to be very much active now and in future while we are studying and teaching. And the fourth issue I would like to mention here is ongoing learning. We have been talking about lifelong learning almost a century, but now I think it's time to talk about ongoing learning. This is especially something that we have in Finland very strongly stressed in recent months, because the whole approach, how people learn and how they change and develop their competencies is not something not anymore lifelong either, but it is something always in all the phases and all situations. It is kind of approach to learning, something inside of your mind, kind of mindset that you have to be alert and willing and motivated to learn new competencies and skills. Okay, so looking at these perspectives to the future, the question is, of course, that how to prepare students for a workplace which requires constant adaptations and change in your learning and your learning skills. One more issue, now considering individual learners' perspective. I know all of us face these kind of situations almost daily. We are searching information, we are negotiating, we have conflicts, social and cognitive conflicts, we are interpreting new information, we are reading, communicating, emailing, and we are sometimes very happy about all this, but also quite often quite burned out and stressed about all this load we have in our daily life. Therefore, reviewing what are the aspects, where to focus if we are looking learning success in future and among this generation Z. And I have a list of issues which are grounded on the research work we have working. And I would like to stress these 4 aspects. First is ability to adapt. And I stress this adapt to new situations and challenges so that people are continuously able to engage and start new thinking and rethinking in solving and working together. Secondly, what is needed in these processes is social skills in order to be able to communicate, collaborate, and be productive and do that proficiently. Thirdly comes this hot cognition, what I mentioned previously. And this is dealing socio-emotional skills, those that you are able to feel empathy, and you are able to approach so that you don't give up if you meet challenges and so on. And the 4th is ability to be authentic, take initiative, set goals, monitor those goals, and progress of your goals among yourself and the others. Saying that, as a learning scientist, is always important to remind that there are some facts which stay among humans and dealing with human learning. We know that our technology is increasing rapidly, and we can increase, for example, our computer memory almost endlessly. But what we have here, like our human cognition and our human learning ability, it is very stable. We cannot change our memory system, for example. So therefore we know from learning sciences about 20, 30 years research, some very basic facts which are still stays, and we have to always remember those. So one of the things is, of course, that learning is not remembering, but it is being strategic and adaptive agent. Because actually today, and especially in future, skill and will of learning matters. The reason is that we in our field are very fluent actually working with different kind of knowledge building systems. We have been working about 10 years intensively globally. I know you have been doing that as well. And we know quite well how people can construct new knowledge collaboratively, because I feel that collaborative learning is one of the most, if not the most powerful way of learning in general. So we are rather good on that. But how to make these adaptations, be authentic, set your goals, change your learning activities, and change your strategies, and especially when you are working in situations which are challenging, new, changing with other people. And that's a question, and that's something where we have to put more effort. I'm sorry to say this, but we know again that learning is hard, and deep learning is especially hard. Learning is always dealing with your own mind, your own engagement, something that you have to activate in your mind. No one is able to do it for you. And that's actually the core issue which activates everything in learning and makes you successful or not successful in your learning. But there is a lot of to support that, as we know. So therefore, I've introduced you a theory which helps you in this complex process of learning, and it is self-regulated learning theory. We know in research that human mind is a complex process as such, because everything is dealing with not only cognition and how our cognition is working, but it's always dealing with affect and emotion. And motivation is a driving force, how we approach on learning situations and learning tasks. And everything above that is metacognition, which is something very human-like. We can think about our thinking, how we feel, what we know, how we approach, and so on. And if we look at this at the individual level, that's complex. But if we look at the group level, that's even more complex, because group is interacting with the other people's minds. And nowadays always with several kind of artifacts, especially with technology. So counting all this learning as a system, it is quite complex. But as I mentioned, there is nothing to worry about, because we have a good theory which helps, and that's self-regulated learning. Self-regulated learning theory is not new. We have already decades of research on that area. If I simplify it, it is explaining about active and proactive learning process. It is explaining a process of learning, how you monitor, evaluate, and regulate, or actually change your own thinking, your own motivation, your own emotions, and after all, your own behavior in order to change your learning more successful. This is something very human-like ability which only humans can do. The good thing, and which keeps me so interested in working in this field, that we know from very strong evidence, and this is an adaptive process, and you develop and you refine over your own lifetime. And you can develop these skills from very early of your first years, even very young children until your old age. So it is a very good and hopeful theory which can also put a lot to practice. Before I progress, I would like to mention this concept of regulation, because actually it is quite a deep concept. Regulation is about strategic adaptation by individuals in their mind and learning process. And we also know that it is dealing with adaptation by groups as well. I would like to emphasize that regulation is more than action, it's more than coordination of things. It is not interaction, and it is not only communication, what you do in this course. And it is not similar as knowledge construction. It is related in all these issues, but it is something different and above all these processes. I simplify this issue a bit. In practice, I always would like to mention it, that it is something like experimenting with your learning in your mind. We talk about self-regulation cycles, which usually successful learning and strong learners kind of automatically and very implicitly always activate. It is dealing with task understanding. Students are conscious about the task and they understand the task and the reasons why they are working, and they set goals, what they want to understand. And they are able, while they set goals, they are able to implement what would be the best strategy to apply. And while they progress in their working, they are able to change or adapt if they face learning challenges. And that's what metacognitive monitoring fuels you to do. So you are able to change your thinking and your strategies. For example, repair, set other kind of goals, or implement a strategy which is not working if you notice that there is something wrong and you feel frustrated and your emotion shows that you need to regulate your emotions. I would like to emphasize that self-regulation is not anything dealing with only schools or education, but it is for your life. And that's why it is so important for the Generation Z perspective. For example, we know from very strong evidence that successful athletes always regulate their learning and performance. So it is always important also outside of the school. Here are two pictures from my two favorite sports and sportsmen actually. Roger Federer, who is the most elegant tennis player for me at least, and my son, who is higher education students in my university, but also playing professional Finnish baseball. And those two games are very strategic, and always while you are playing in very critical situations, you are able to monitoring the situation from the cognitive perspective, but also regulate your emotions and in order to able to set the perfect hit and see the situation in the playing field. So it is always continuous play of and regulation of your cognition and motivation and your affects. The work we have been doing is dealing with collaborative learning and collaborative groups. And our findings quite systematically, increasingly show that self-regulation is always and also important in collaborative groups. And this is an example from one of our video clip from our higher education, actually teacher education students collaborative learning session. And you may see that this is from the 34 minutes since this group started. And you may think that how happy they look and they are so fluent and collaborative learning is so wonderful for them. And that's true, actually. When we went in details to this video situation, we were able to analyze from the very beginning that this group put considerable effort in the beginning to setting their goals, confirming the task understanding. And doing that, they were able to create very nice emotional and motivational climate for their group. And it really helps their engagement in collaboration. So this group activated socially shared regulation concerning the task understanding and setting goals. Again, few issues, since I believe this collaborative learning is so important. We know the definition of collaborative learning. The most often cited definition comes from Rochelle and Teasley, and it is dealing with coordinated synchronous activity. It is dealing something to construct and maintain a shared understanding and shared concept of a problem. And this shared processes is something what is very hard. This is something very challenging, especially in the group level. Because looking backwards our work in computer-supported collaborative learning and research on collaborative learning and group dynamics, we have plenty of evidence that how many things can go wrong in collaboration. There is a strong history dealing with group dynamics research and social cognition, that social loafing, dynamics may be problematic, there is free riding effect, there might be conflicts, we wish they would be cognitive conflicts, but quite often they are socio-emotional conflicts. There are challenges with grounding and especially dealing with achieving shared understanding. Therefore, we have been continuing with our colleagues to extend this self-regulation theory to the peer and group level. Because we know that successful collaboration needs not only regulating yourself, but also supporting each other's regulation, which is co-regulation, but especially ultimately regulating together, which is dealing with social self-regulation, in order to regulate those challenges which are emerging in the process of your learning, and especially in this shared process of learning. So the concept of social self-regulation in learning is dealing to achieve success in collaboration, and there are kind of two aspects we have been emphasizing in this theory and concept. It is dealing with co-constructing shared goals and plans and representation, and achieving shared strategies in your cognitive learning. But it is also regulating your learning process through shared metacognitive monitoring and your shared control of cognition, motivation, emotions, and your behavior. In practice, this is to simplify these concepts. In collaborative learning situation, all the students individually have to activate planning, monitoring, evaluating, and regulating those challenging situations. But it is also happening in most successful cases with peers, and actually collaborative learning sets very nice situations for co-regulation, because then you can regulate and prompt and help your peers by asking that, did you notice this, or there seems to be a problem. So you are kind of helping in questioning and prompting and monitoring and activating these regulatory processes in between peers in a group. But what we know that ultimately those groups who know and share the task understanding, this is what we all aim. And they have a joint goal, this is where we want to aim. And this is the best strategy that we all activate. And this is the way how we observe that, hey, there might be something wrong, why we don't progress, why we want to give up, or why we feel so unsure about this. And they are able to activate in those situations their joint and shared emotion regulation, for example, that what we have to do to change our learning process. Okay, so spending some time on discussing about theory, and especially in group level, which is social self-regulation, I will shortly describe about our work. One thing which has been very important, especially in our work and in general in the field, is the fact that as a learning scientist, we are facing a serious methodological problem. If we compare to the medical doctors, as you see, they can see something from human body with X-rays or scanning or biopsy or so on. But we cannot scan here, we cannot take X-rays about human mind, and we cannot see how well they learn, how much they learn. So learners' cognition, motivation and emotions are not visible to researchers for us to study, but it's not neither visible for themselves to regulate those processes I previously explained. And it's not also help for teachers to support those very important processes, and actually those critical processes what would need most supported. Therefore, in our research agenda, we have been investigating regulatory processes, especially in authentic collaborative learning situations. Because we feel it is important to study in authentic situations with all its intervening factors, then you can get realistic understanding about those situations. We have especially been working with multimodal data, which means that we have added more data channels than typically learning scientists do, because that has helped us to understand more about those critical processes of self-regulation. And because we always want to help learners, we have always been developing different kinds of supports and scaffolds for social self-regulation, especially in the computer-supported collaborative learning context. Today I'm not going to go in very details with our methods or how do we investigate, but this is a kind of typical setting we have been working. We have a very classroom-like learning infrastructure where we can have optimal conditions for study collaborative learning. And the multimodal setting means that we have added all the possible data channels which we feel are important. For example, we always videotape with 360-degree cameras what is going on in collaborative group sessions. We always gather, students always work with different kind of technologies, and we use log data and different kind of questionnaires, online situated questionnaires implemented in those environments. We collect eye tracking data in groups and individuals, and we use sensors, multi-sensor devices in order to track students' physiological data, electrodermal activity and heart rate, for example. And also use other kind of more traditional self-report data dealing with students' background and so on. So having this kind of tradition to study collaborative learning and especially regulatory processes in learning, there are a few issues. This is not easy, I would say, because this needs very much multidisciplinary expertise. And we get very big and complex data sets, and this is something we have been trying to understand systematically during the past 5 years. But it seems that there are a few issues which are more systematically accumulating in our different studies and findings. The first thing is that we know that learners do not recognize opportunities for social self-regulation. They might be working very nicely and fluently and discussing and interacting nicely, but they don't realize a situation, for example, when things go wrong. For example, when there is an emotional conflict. And if we are able to help them to recognize those situations in terms of cognition, motivation, emotions, they are able to notice those, recognize those challenges and activate regulation. And that helps them to progress in their successful collaborative learning. Another thing what is very important is that time and adaptation is important in a progressive regulation. Regulation is not something that you can implement just like that. But it is something that when you are able to observe and understand and monitor your learning progress and the group progress, and you are aware about that, then also you are able to start social self-regulation, and some of the groups are able to learn how to regulate together. Something quite interesting comes from very different studies, our early studies and our very recent studies, that usually almost always something dealing with social or motivational or socio-emotional aspects in collaboration, recognizing them and regulating them, noticing those problems in that area and being able to change those problems together in group usually change the group work successfully. Those groups who are able to do that usually receive the best results. Also, we have more studies to show that when we are able to evidence, especially social self-regulation to occur in those groups who work together, usually the collaborative learning results is also better. But this is something we need more evidence to show the real connections about these regulatory processes in group level and the collaborative learning results. But what is clear is that students can benefit greatly about the support. If we support them to regulate together, it usually helps. And this is something we have been working in various levels during the past years. So I show you actually three kind of examples we've been working in, building on our theoretical work and empirical findings, and how we have been using these ideas to develop even quite small ideas to the large-scale areas for better learning success and especially training 21st century learning skills. First is that we have been working for developing socially self-regulation tools. This has been especially supporting groups to realize this social self-regulation, helping them to construct shared task representations, understanding the task together, helping them to set goals together, and helping them to implement their strategies, our strategies in the group. Secondly, we have been implementing some of the best ideas from collaborative learning research and integrated some of our work, for example, to sociability tools and helping groups to develop their awareness, how they are doing in order to activate regulation. And since we know that there is something very important in this socio-emotional issue in groups, then we also have put effort on increasing awareness of motivation and emotional regulation. I quite fastly go through these tools. We have been working these, some of them are quite early and some of them are more recent, but we have been building on our experience of very small ideas first and try to develop small ideas with big theories behind. This is something we started to work, we implemented some of the support dealing with social self-regulation for the existing sociability tools, and we did work together with Dutch people, Dutch colleagues in this these tools we called radar and social self-regulation tools. Secondly, we created a more detailed simple web application, which we called SREC, especially for prompting groups to be aware about their cognitive, motivational and emotional states while they start working together, while they are in the middle of the collective learning process. And the tool helped, it worked like a traffic light metaphor to share individual responses and solve problems group level. And we provided simple regulation prompts for groups to activate their social self-regulation. We have been working with different kinds of simple online evaluation forms where students have been reporting their situated cognition, motivation, emotions and progress. And we have been creating retrospective dashboards for groups to show their progress and create a group awareness about these processes and provide a setting for regulation to occur. And in a recent rather large study in secondary level, we have been put more emphasis on in situ online prompts and temporal reports about cognition, motivation, emotion built in a learning environment, and we've been working there with the company. Secondly, we have been also working in a whole school level. This is a study we actually started quite a long time ago already. We worked with our teacher training school to start designing the whole physical environment and renew the classroom, architecture and structure and acoustics and designs. We were lucky to join from the very beginning to work together with the architects and interior designers and teachers, of course, because we built the whole idea to the theory of self-regulated learning and social self-regulated learning. The whole idea in this design was not to change something in a more fashionable or exciting, but to think about how we can help to create such kind of environment for individual, but also for groups, which helps they develop self-regulated learning and also in individual and group level. Basically, we worked with teachers and we focused on especially teaching those strategic skills in self-regulation for students. We used some of our simple tools and technologies to prompt in students' planning and goal setting, for example. And of course, we implemented various kind of technologies for students and teachers. One of the key ideas in this physical environment was that we designed everything so that it helps to create those kind of learning situations which are easy to transfer and smoothly choose and change from solo to collaborative practices, for example. And we also created few communal places, especially for social self-regulation to occur, so that there would be also those kind of emotionally and motivational inspiring situations for students which give the space and opportunity for example, co-regulation or social self-regulation. And we also brought quite strongly this collaborative knowledge building idea, of course, and we created even physical situations for solo and collaborative and shared learning activities in this environment. Thirdly, third aspect where we have been implementing these ideas is teacher education. And this is something we have been working with 3 other universities, University of Jyväskylä and University of Eastern Finland. This is a longitudinal study which we are still reporting, but we worked with several teacher education cohorts, and our sole idea was to prepare teacher education students for 21st century learning practices. We especially emphasized 3 issues: ways of thinking, strategic learning skills, which is socially self-regulation and self-regulation in general. We especially stressed ways of working, which is collaborative problem solving, and we also emphasized tools for working, which is training and supporting the attitudes and skills towards using technology in teaching and learning. The ideas we especially worked are dealing with regulation in learning, and for example, we promoted situations for active learning and interactive situations in groups, and we prompted and trained the socially self-regulation skills with the tools we have been working and I previously showed you. We also did several training, especially for those collaborative problem-solving skills. In general, we try to think broadly how we can implement various digital solutions for active learning, so that we really would steer digitality to kindle learning, so not only to perform or pass it, but so that it would be in the center of students' active learning and providing opportunities also for regulation to occur and training regulation, so that they ask questions, explain, argue, and study complex phenomena together in collaborative groups. Okay, so before I turn to the Gen Z part, I would like to summarize my message today. So, from my opinion, there are 4 issues very important at the moment. First of all, my message is that if we think about the future, Generation Z and today, the students' will and skills need training, because this is something which provides them opportunities for ongoing learning attitude, but also ongoing learning skills. So therefore, we have to train for solo and collaborative collective success, but also train for failure, because those challenging learning situations and failing also trains regulation, so that you can activate your regulation. What is wrong? Why we did not succeed? How could I prepare? How could we activate, for example, motivation regulation, or activate better learning strategies? It is absolutely helping learners to become aware about their strengths and weaknesses, and kind of helping them to be aware and investigate their own learning. And this is actually self-regulation. And in general, it is very important that we think big, think about the whole socio-technical system actually, how we can bring these learning abilities and skills in the individual, group level, and also in the learning environment level, bringing technologies and other people to help that. So, future perspectives. I think this is where we are, and this is where we have to stay very, very strongly in research to help practice. In general, this borderline is what is very critical. As I said, I very much welcome the efficiency coming from artificial intelligence and robotics and all this, because no one beats that, how helpful those patterns and models and efficiencies processing and helping human cognition, for example, is available for us. But as important is to put effort on that what is very human-like and what we as humans are the best. And this is dealing with all this sensitive communication, reliable, motivation, emotion, metacognition, socio-emotional interactions, and all this creativity and smart thinking we as humans are able to do. And therefore we have to be in this crossroad, combine that. And that means looking forward and breaking traditional boundaries of learning so that we are able to take even more bold and ambitious implications for increasing human competence. And this is what we are working together for there. We have several millions of funding from the Finnish Academy in Oulu University, Human Sciences. We are working in the project to strengthen human capabilities. This is the project called Generation Z and Beyond, Co-Evolution of Human Capabilities and Intelligent Technologies in the 21st Century. And if I had an opportunity, I would show you a video. Perhaps I can do that later. But I will introduce this project for you. Basically, three core issues are important in our work. First is, as we have been discussing, Generation Z, but also beyond, so that we are actively thinking about this generation and how fluent these and we hopefully are to work with our current and evolving technologies, and especially focusing on human skills and capabilities, what are very natural and which are something very, what is very human-like and our strengths in that issues, and especially what technologies lack. And also take very active a look to the technological transformation and look far and think about how we can combine all these three issues. I'm especially with my group and other colleagues from affective computing and some other disciplines working with co-evolution team, strengthening human skills and capabilities in the changing world. And what is very important starting point for us in this is that usually in our field, we have always been working with the question that how humans react and use and apply new technologies. And that's not enough anymore. But now we have to look at how human sciences can participate co-evolution of human capabilities and intelligent technology. So we have to participate right now. Bring every knowledge we have about self-regulation, about collaboration already while new technologies are discovered and implemented, not after something already has been done. Therefore, the challenges and the questions we are currently working in our Gen Z project. We have quite large resources available. We have now 5 tenure positions and some other postdoc positions available. Actually, we are just evaluating our applicants in different multidisciplinary fields. So we have quite good forces among our existing forces to work with these questions. So the questions I am especially interested with my team is to, first of all, of course, how to prepare students for a workplace that requires constant adaptations and learning. And what are especially the adequate skills in terms of cognition, motivation, affect, and social level. And how digitalization can provide adaptive support for ongoing learning. And this is where we strongly bring this social self-regulation concept. And also to try to effect on practice how we can implement not our current available but future technologies for researching, understanding with these multimodal new channels, new abilities to understand something complex human processes, and how we can bring this information to the practice, to teaching and learning as well. So actually this is something I wanted to talk to you today, and I would like to thank you for this opportunity, but if there are any questions, I'm also very pleased to answer if that's possible from very distant.
Thank you very much, Professor JÄRVELÄ. So is there any questions, any comments from anyone? Okay.
I have a question for you. I've been working with Nancy for this thing called the self-directed learning. In your opinion, how would you actually see the similarity or the differences between self-regulated learning and self-directed learning?
Yes, they are different. If I simplify that, the whole approach in self-regulated learning is continuously train you to be better learner. So self-regulation is training your learning skills, your motivation, your strategies, and also emotional regulation. Self-directed learning is something which helps you to achieve your learning goal and your learning project as efficiently as possible. And perhaps the area I'm working in self-regulated learning, self-directed learning is something very different for me. Perhaps that's a concept more relevant for working life, for example.
Actually, I have a question. So you've been talking about how you have been using multimodal sorts of equipment and methods to understand or explore self-regulated and socially shared regulated learning. Can you give us some example of, say, one or two of such studies?
For example, my student Hector Pias just 4 weeks ago defended in a topic where we tried to understand more about the sharing in collaboration. We know that how important that in collaborative learning, something that all the students are in the kind of same level in terms of their thinking and prior knowledge and understanding. He used EDA data, which is students wear sensors in groups, and it collected electrodermal activity, and he looked how much the physiological how much in the same level the physiological reactions were in the group, because that was one of our hypotheses that if we follow the same groups while they are working with quite challenging tasks, perhaps those physiological reactions in an individual level, and when we look at the synchronicity in between different individual levels, are able to show us some of the critical moments in collaborative work where all the students are facing a challenging situation. And if we are able to find with this kind of data, this kind of challenging situation or episode, then we are look at whether they were able to activate regulation, or if not, how we could prompt or support in these situations. So basically this is trying to first get evidence about something which we are not able to get with other existing methods. After that, if we are able to use, for example, physiological synchrony as one of the indicators in this shared or unshared critical moments in collaboration, then we are able to get more bigger data for example, tens of groups and hours of collaborative sessions, and afterwards, for example, go to the machine learning analysis and start working for adaptive supports for those critical moments.
Thank you. Is there any?
Professor JÄRVELÄ, thanks for your sharing. I have a question. I wanted to know, how do you perceive the relationship between self-regulated learning and socially shared regulated learning in the context of collaborative problem solving? Because I read some articles and there seem two kinds of assumptions. One is to view the self-regulated learning and socially shared regulated learning at the same level. So they will recognize if the students are talking to themselves or monitor their own behavior, then it will be viewed as self-regulated learning. And for those moments, they monitor their good performance, then it will be viewed as a socially shared regulated learning moment. But there are also some scholars, they think the self-regulated learning is behind the socially shared regulated learning. So it's part of the socially shared regulated learning. So what do you think of the relationship in the context of collaborative problem solving?
If I understood your question correctly, for me there is no socially shared regulation learning without activating self-regulation among students, because this is something that at the moment we are studying how co-regulation and self-regulation are kind of putting a stage for socially shared regulation. I think that at the moment we think that it is very important that we strongly evidence students activating self-regulation themselves, and we believe that the group has to have certain kind of co-regulation, because activating something together with your peers is actually grounding or building opportunities for whole group level understanding how they are progressing, how much they understand, or how should they progress and work together. So there are three concepts, but I understand that this is a very active research area, and people are working with these concepts, and I think there are some difficulties at the moment to find out what is the best way to analyze this concept and in general operationalize it in the analysis.
Thank you very much. I think we will, we'll probably have a lot of questions because it's a very complex area and also a very hot area of research. But in the interest of time, I would like to invite all of you to join me in thanking Professor JÄRVELÄ. And we look forward to seeing you again in Hong Kong in November. Thank you.
Looking forward to that, and hope you have a very interesting and successful symposium.
Yeah, thank you. Well, actually, I want to put in, I forgot to put in one word. One of the things that, Professor JÄRVELÄ has been working on the project called Generation Zen. Actually, in Hong Kong, we are, in our faculty, we are leading a project, which is a joint university project between Hong Kong U and the University of Science and Technology on learning and assessment of digital citizenship. And there is a lot of common interest, although they're not exactly the same, but there's a lot of common interest between these two projects. And in fact, we will be inviting Professor JÄRVELÄ to come because the project itself wants to invite Professor JÄRVELÄ to be to look at what we have been doing and to share and perhaps to build collaborations. Thank you.